From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. We're going to start with some breaking news at this hour. Emergency crews still on the scene of a deadly accident west of Billings. Here's what we know so far. A one-vehicle accident on 64th Street just south of Danford Road has resulted in at least 2 people dead tonight. Another sent to the hospital with serious injuries. This according to Trooper Gardner on the scene. At least some of the occupants in the vehicle were minors. The driver was traveling on 64th Street when that vehicle rolled, landing upright in a ditch. This all happening just shortly before 9 o'clock tonight. That street is currently blocked starting on Danford Road. This is a developing story, and we'll get you more information on KTVQ.com just as soon as we find it. Well, it's one of President Joe Biden's first acts in office, an executive order halting construction of the controversial Keystone XL pipeline. Today, Montana Governor Greg Gianforte flew to Phillips County to get an up-close look at one of the now shuttered sites where work had been taking place. That pipeline would have cut through parts of 6 eastern Montana counties. The project has received support from all 3 members of Montana's congressional delegation, and without it, a State Department report estimates a more than $55 million property tax loss in the first year of operation across 27 U.S. counties. The entire tour focused on hearing directly from those impacted by President Joe Biden's Keystone XL pipeline decision. Gianforte made 3 stops today. The first, a pipe yard in Phillips County, a second at a pole yard owned by Big Flat Electric Co-op, and the final stop, a roundtable event with community members in Glasgow. Gianforte hopes the community testimony will help put a face to the issue and in turn help encourage President Biden to reverse his decision.
There's no good reason why Montanans have lost their jobs and are sitting at home right now, except that President Biden is trying to make a political statement and pandering to environmental extremists.
Montana lawmakers are considering a bill that would provide state compensation to those who have been wrongfully imprisoned for a crime they didn't commit, but that bill facing some resistance over its potential cost. Advocates believe that bill could save the state money by possibly heading off larger awards in court. MTN's Mike Dennison has the story, including some new details on the largest settlement paid out in a Montana wrongful conviction case.
2 years ago, Freddie Joe Lawrence and Paul Jenkins were exonerated after spending 24 years in prison for a Helena area murder they didn't commit. They then sued the local law officers who prosecuted them and later agreed to a settlement worth $6 million for each man. It's by far the largest payout in Montana for a wrongful conviction lawsuit. House Bill 92 before the current legislature would set up a system in which the state will pay claims at a predetermined amount to people who were wrongfully imprisoned. Supporters of the bill say the payments could dissuade exonerees from suing and winning huge judgments. If a wrongfully imprisoned person gets a claim and sues anyway, they have to pay the claim back if they win a judgment in the lawsuit. But the bill is stalled in the House Appropriations Committee after facing some tough questions last week from panel members about its potential cost. Republican Representative Bill Mercer of Billings questioned whether the bill's estimated $700,000 price tag would be enough and asked where the money would come from in the state budget. And GOP Representative Brad Cheetah of Missoula wondered if the state is the responsible party in a wrongful conviction.
It seems to me that if we have an issue at the county level, let's say for example, where someone is wrongfully charged and convicted, and now the state is taking up responsibility for that, I don't see any mention being made of why the state would be on the hook financially for something that might be outside our realm of responsibility.
Case in point, the $12 million settlement paid to Lawrence and Jenkins within the past 18 months came from insurers for the Montana counties who prosecuted the 2 men. But S.K. Rossi of the American Civil Liberties Union said the state still bears some responsibility.
County attorneys get their power from the state. County attorneys are not prosecuting county laws. County attorneys are prosecuting state laws on behalf of the state.
One of the key advocates for HB 92 has been Cody Marble, a 36-year-old man from Conrad who spent more than 10 years in prison for a rape he didn't commit. His father, Jerry Marble, told MTN News this week he can't believe lawmakers would deny compensation to those wrongfully imprisoned for years at a time. And the bill's sponsor, Democratic Representative Kathy Kelker of Billings, says without the bill, she fears the state will end up paying big damage claims in court. The bill is currently tabled in the House Appropriations Committee while supporters search for a possible solution to the funding question. That means, for now, the bill goes nowhere. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Well, it's estimated that only 7 people may be eligible for compensation under the bill's current language, although they'd still have to prove certain things in court to get a claim. The all-class wrestling tournament has been split up this year because of COVID. This year's event at the Metro would have also included the first girls tournament. Instead, the split has created an opportunity in Lockwood. From wrestlers to coaches to parents, it was an emotional and memorable day. Here's Q2's David J. with more.
Family and friends enjoy the very first Montana State Girls Wrestling Tournament.
It's been nothing but positive right now, and you know, there's always things that we're going to want to tweak, but right now things have been going great and a lot of smiles, and the most important thing is the smile on these kids' face.
Mike Erickson, Lockwood School's activities director, says this is the first big event at the Lockwood High School gym. Each of the 154 athletes received 4 tickets, and schools received 10 tickets for coaches, bus drivers, and administrators, and those spectators are split into 2 sessions.
103 to 126 was in our first session, the 132 to the heavyweights in for the second session.
The very first girls tournament, they do have some limitations as well for COVID, but even with all that, everyone here seems to tell us that it's got a great atmosphere for a tournament.
Especially having the parents being able to come and so many girls being out, it definitely feels full and like it's real and not in COVID scenarios.
I have to check my pulse before every match because I can hear the crowd noise and our girls are getting out there, so you definitely get that tournament atmosphere.
Energy's great. The kids are having a blast. They don't have to worry about wrestling boys. I mean, I think this is here to stay. I do.
And they say the Lockwood gym is a good tournament site.
The gym is beautiful. They're putting on a show and the fans are excited.
We pulled up, I was in almost disbelief. It's a beautiful venue.
You know, I've got an office sitting right over top of the gymnasium, and it's been pretty lonely up there for this COVID year, you know, and not seeing everything going on, but it's surreal. I feel like we're back to some sort of normalcy.
It's also been good for the athletes.
I lost both of my matches, but I mean, it was still a great experience.
In Lockwood, David J., MTN News.
Thanks, David. We're going to have more on that breaking news we told you about at the start of the newscast coming up. But still to come, also the Keystone Pipeline to COVID relief. We're going to hear from Montana Representative Matt Rosendale. It's his first sit-down interview since taking office. Then later in sports, we'll have more from the wrestling tournament. And also, we got basketball district tournament action.
From Montana's news leader, you're watching the
And back to some breaking news we've been telling you about. This is video from out on 64th Street and Danford Road. 2 people are reported dead after a single vehicle accident out there. And we know one other person was sent to the hospital, at least one other person. A trooper on the scene told us that some of the occupants in that vehicle were minors. We'll have more on this story on KTVQ.com just as soon as we get it. Well, in the first sit-down interview since becoming Montana's new congressman, Republican Matt Rosendale spoke openly about what's ahead. That includes discussion of the Keystone Pipeline, COVID relief, and his plans for his term in a Democratic-controlled House. MTN's Andrea Lutz sat down with Rosendale and has more.
After weeks in Washington, D.C., Montana's lone congressman, Matt Rosendale, is back in Montana.
It is just an absolute honor to represent the people across this state.
He says he's spent the last 3 days traveling eastern Montana, exploring the economic impact of the shutdown of the Keystone Pipeline after the Biden administration revoked the permit.
And we've already lost like 200 jobs immediately, and those jobs were really helping the local communities at a time when they needed it the most. When you start talking about counties that have populations of 1,500 to 3,000 people, and they're going to have a loss of revenue of $2.5 to $5 million a year, that is an enormous hit.
And here's another item keeping the Republican freshman representative busy: COVID relief. He says a current $1.9 trillion bill before Congress is riddled with other expenditures, saying the focus needs to be on getting money to businesses.
I think that we have to figure out who has actually suffered because of a job being shut down and make sure that they are made whole, is what I think. Okay, and there's a lot of people that not necessarily are going to be under those same circumstances. So let's not just take a big paintbrush and say everybody is going to be treated the exact same.
He's already been assigned to his committees and says his biggest focuses are immigration, healthcare, Veterans Affairs, and natural resources, saying he brings much experience already as Montana's former auditor.
And in order for our veterans to really receive the benefits that they've earned and that they certainly deserve, we have to have a smooth flow of information from the Department of Defense information, because that's what establishes what benefits they're supposed to get.
He's looking back at this year's major events, the election, insurrection, and inauguration.
I attended the inauguration. I believe in our institutions. I believe that they are solid and that we must support them. But to go through a 10-foot fence with razor wire on top of it to attend the inauguration, it's disturbing.
He says even though he called for the removal of fellow Republican and neighboring Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney from the chair of the House Republican Conference, he says moving forward, it's water under the bridge.
Yesterday's news was yesterday's news, and what I focus on every day is what do we need to do today, and who can help me accomplish that today. And if we have an issue that comes up that she and I are going to, it's going to be beneficial for the country, for our respective states to work together, I absolutely can sit down and work with her.
Rosendale also addressing his stance on election fraud, saying testimony of irregularities in some state races need to be addressed at now the state level.
It was never about President Trump. To me, it was never about President Trump. It was never about a campaign or a candidate. What it was about is election integrity. And when you have thousands, not a handful, thousands of sworn affidavits, you have evidence that was never allowed to be produced in courtrooms. So I have to take the information from the different testimony that was presented to us on the House floor. That is why on several of the states, I rejected those electors.
We spoke for roughly a half hour, and he left no issue off the table for discussion. But when it comes to Montana and serving the state, he left us with this.
I mean, we get one representative, and when I walk into a committee meeting or a caucus meeting, they know. Montana, the guy from Montana, he represents 144,000 square miles and about 1 million people. And they also know that I keep in touch with all of them, and it is an honor to represent the people across this state.
In Billings, Andrea Lutz, MTN News.
Thanks, Andrea. And you can catch Andrea's entire interview with Congressman Matt Rosendale online right now on KTVQ.com. All right, up next in weather, Ed will fill us in on what's ahead for the weekend and beyond.